Welcome to the BearsTalk Podcast, your ultimate source for all things Bears. Hosted by Bryan Perez, editor of Chicago Bears on SI. From insider analysis to the latest news, we cover everything you need to know about the monsters of the Midway. Stay locked in. Bears football starts now.
It is a great day to be a Chicago Bears fan. Welcome back to the BearsTalk Podcast. I am your host and the editor of Bears on SI, Bryan Perez, and we have a really fun show for you guys. Joining us today is the Athlon Sports NFL Draft expert, Luke Easterling, who's going to give us an overview of the 2025 NFL Draft as it relates to the Chicago Bears. We're going to dive into his latest NFL mock draft, which has a really interesting strategic approach for the Bears in the first round. It's an exciting one, Bears fans. You're going to want to check it out. Before we get into the interview, though, I have to ask you guys to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Make sure you're following us. Turn those alerts on every time we post a new video. We want you to be aware of it. Make sure if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast provider, you subscribe there as well. As I've said in the last couple of videos, we're trying to grow this show organically through you guys, Bears Nation. The only way we can do that is if you actually subscribe. The response so far to the show has been overwhelmingly outstanding, and we appreciate you guys for checking in. We have a lot of fun things coming up for the Chicago Bears over the next couple of weeks. The 2025 NFL Draft is less than 2 weeks away, and the Chicago Bears are one of the true wild card teams in the first round. We literally don't know what they're going to do at the 10th pick. We don't even know if they're going to keep the 10th pick. It's either an offensive lineman, it might be a running back, maybe it's a tight end, maybe it's a wild card position that we're not even thinking about. We're going to dive into all of that and more with Luke Easterling. Why waste any time? Let's bring Luke in right now. With the 2025 NFL Draft less than 2 weeks away, we have to bring back one of our favorite NFL Draft experts to the show, Luke Easterling, the NFL Draft lead over at athlonsports.com. He's going to jump in the show right now, help us learn everything you guys need to know about what GM Ryan Poles and the Bears might do, not only in the first round, but throughout the rest of the draft. And Bears fans, if you want to get a real in-depth look at what Luke thinks about the entire 2025 NFL Draft class, if my green screen will cooperate, there it is, the brains behind the Athlon Sports NFL Draft Guide, which you can find at your favorite newsstand, CVS, Walgreens, wherever you pick up your old school draft guides. I'm still an old school draft guy and an old school draft book fan. And Luke, awesome job on this year's Athlon Draft Sports Guide. Tell the Bears fans out there and just NFL draft fans in general, what's it like going through a process like that? Because I'm sure you have a whole team of guys and gals you work with, but the amount of players you evaluate, the in-depth analysis from traits to stats to background, that's got to be a real labor of love, my friend.
It is, man. And I love the fact that the green screen couldn't figure out who was Travis Hunter and who was Shedeur Sanders and who was Bryan Perez. It's clearly, it's high praise.
At this point in the process, honestly, I can't even figure it out either, Luke. I mean, I'm kind of confused by that too.
No, honestly, man. Yeah. I growing up, being a fan of the draft and obviously a football fan for many, many years and reading the Athlon magazine every year and always looking forward to buying it. And now being able to be such a big part of putting that together. Absolutely, like bucket list item, man. I still just, I'm still just like a kid looking at it when I see my name in that magazine. It's just so cool. It still hasn't gotten old. Obviously super grateful to the team that puts it together. So many talented people. Doug Farrar has some great features in this year's magazine again. Matt Taliaferro and Rob Doster, our editor and design team, they do such a fantastic job. Thomas Newman, our editor. Craig Ellenport, who does a lot of editing work for us on the NFL side. Just such a great team of people. It's so cool to have a support network to help. But yeah, when it comes to the actual, when the rubber meets the road, man, it is a lot of work. But what I've realized is the second year that I've done the magazine now, and I've realized how much it has helped me when we get to this part of the process, because I feel like before, I'd have kind of a slow burn leading through the whole draft process. And now kind of the magazine, obviously we have to send that stuff to print, in February. And so it forces me to get ahead of the game on a lot of the film work. It forces me to be well versed on a lot of the players well before I used to be in the process. It forces me to get a lot of that work done earlier than I usually do. And so at this point in the process, I feel like I'm more able to find, late round guys and sleepers and kind of put the cherry on top of the process and find, creative and unique ways to present content, as opposed to trying to play catch up at this point in the process, which a lot of years it felt like that. Now with the ability to put the magazine together, it definitely makes my January and my February a lot more work than it used to be. But man, I feel like it gives me such a stronger foundation for the process when we get to March and when we get to April. I feel like I've done so much of the foundational work already. And again, it's a project I absolutely love being a part of.
Luke, that kind of brings us to our first major talking point here for the 2025 NFL Draft, because as you said, you've been doing this a long time. I mean, I've been a fan of your work for, it feels like, over a decade now. You and I kind of came up through this industry on parallel tracks. The history goes beyond just covering the draft as an analyst, as an expert, as part of the professional media, right? You've been a fan of the draft for many, many years, even before that. The 2025 NFL Draft feels pretty unique in terms of a level of unpredictability in the first round, something that it doesn't feel like we've kind of had this experience in quite some time, where maybe we know the first 3 players that should get selected in this draft. That's Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. Don't really know who's going to be second, who's going to be third, who might trade up. And we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll cover your latest mock draft. Who might trade up to get one of those guys. But once those 3 are off the board, from pick 4 on, it feels like it's going to be the wild, wild west. Is that fair? Is that a fair interpretation of this draft class? And where would you rank this class among maybe, let's say, the last 3 to 5 drafts that have come through the cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where I'd rank it. I think it's in terms of overall class, it's always hard to do that, right? I think it's a lot easier to do it by position in terms of, this receiver class or that running back class or that sort of thing. I think it's a little easier to do that. Overall, I think and Daniel Jeremiah has said this already in the process, it's a meat and potatoes draft. It's a starters draft. And it doesn't feel like there's a ton of elite talent at the top. And I would say there's probably 3 elite prospects in this draft, regardless of position. I think that's Travis Hunter. I think it's Abdul Carter. And I think it's Ashton Jeanty. I think those 3 guys, who are the top 3 guys on my board overall, they're the tier of really special difference maker type of players. But that next tier is big. I think the one thing that I think there's a potential for chaos because it is so unpredictable. But I think it's also, we could go the other way and we could see a lot of teams sticking and picking, because I don't think a lot of teams are going to try to trade up in this first round. I think the majority of the league is going to look at this board and think the difference between the player I can get at 4 or 5 overall and the difference between the player I can get in the 20s and 30s, I don't think it's that big of a gap, man. And I think, and positionally, I think that's the case. If you look at a guy like Mason Graham, I like Mason Graham a lot. But if you're telling me I have to spend a top 5 pick on Mason Graham, or I can wait till the 30s and get guys like Tyleik Williams and Darius Alexander and TJ Sanders, it doesn't feel good to spend a top 7 pick on a guy like Mason Graham in that class. So I think that the depth at certain positions is going to be interesting. I think it's going to be interesting with the conversation with Jeanty as well, because the running back class is so deep. But, overall, I think throughout this, if you go back to last year after the draft, everybody looked ahead to this draft and they were like, it's probably going to be a so-so draft. Quarterback class isn't that great. There's there's not a ton of superstar players. I think the closer we've gotten to this draft, the more we realize it's really not as bad as everybody thought. Even the quarterback class, I think, is not as bad as people originally thought it was, which is why I think Cam Ward's going to go number 1 overall. And I think he deserves it. I really do. I think he's not quite in the echelon of the top 3 guys that went last year, but I think he's deserving of that swing that the Titans, I think, are going to take on him at 1. So I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know if I think it's a really, really above average draft. I think it's a solid class. I think there's a lot of starting caliber players. And again, depending on the positions you need, especially on the defensive line across the board, edge guys, interior guys, I think it's a really, really strong draft. Maybe the deepest along those two groups that I've ever seen.
And where the Bears are sitting at number 10, I mean, you can look at any of the respected mock drafters out there, from the biggest of big media to the small indie blog draft analysts, and it changes by the day. I mean, we have seen mock drafts that from December, let's go back to December when it kind of really started, the mock draft season starts. Will Campbell was the guy. Kelvin Banks was the guy.
Right.
And then it slowly shifted to where maybe it's going to be Ashton Genty. A running back might really be in play for the Bears at number 10. And now you're starting to see some momentum building for Tyler Warren or even Will Johnson or some. Almost every position is up for grabs for the Chicago Bears. If you were GM Ryan Poles, if you were in that catbird seat at number 10 overall, is there a specific direction that you think right now, if you had to put money on what the Chicago Bears might do, forgetting about trading up? Again, we're going to talk about your mock draft in a second, but at that number 10 pick, where do you think the most value lies for the Bears if they stick and pick, like you said, and they don't move around the board and they're at number 10? What's the ideal scenario for them with that 10th selection?
I think the ideal scenario, and again, you spoke to the fact that they've been connected to so many different guys in so many different positions. I think that speaks to how well Ryan Poles has played this offseason so far. I think they've done such a great job of raising the floor of their roster at so many different positions and really filling their most immediate needs with really solid veterans who, if they have to go into the season with those guys starting with, Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney and Grady Jarrett and those guys that they added, again, to raise that floor and just make sure that position is going to be at least acceptable. If they have to walk out week one with these guys in starting positions, I think they've done such a good job at that's why you can have the conversation about Ashton Genty at 10, because, is it a luxury pick? Sure. But if you look around the rest of the roster, you're like, man, I don't know that there's a position that they're just so desperate to fill that they need to make sure they do that instead of taking the third best overall player in this draft. If he falls to him, even if it's a running back. And so, if you have that conversation about Genty, it also, you have to talk about the fact that, can you get a productive running back in the middle rounds? Sure you can, especially in a class this deep. You can definitely get a guy who's probably going to get you 1,000 yards, probably going to get the job done. If you want somebody special, you're going to have to pay for it. And I think when you look at what the league has done over the last few years, you look at what Saquon Barkley did last year in Philly, you look at the fact that the really great running backs, he was, again, second overall pick. Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, have absolutely proven themselves to be worthy of the top 12 picks that they've been over the last couple of years. If you're talking about Genty at 10, I think he's deserving of that as a player. I think he's obviously the best player available on the board at that point, and I really can't see another position. The only position I would say would take precedence, in my opinion, if it were me, would be left tackle, because I'm not as sold on Braxton Jones as it seems like the team is. Seems like they're much more comfortable with Braxton Jones staying at left tackle. I think they could upgrade that. I think honestly, you mentioned Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks. I would be much happier with one of those two guys playing left tackle and protecting Caleb Williams for the long term than I am on a guy in Braxton Jones, who, again, has admirably outplayed his draft slot as a fifth-round pick out of Southern Utah. But if I have an opportunity at this point in the process to upgrade that premium position and one of those two guys is on the board, I might lean that way, partly, again, because this draft is so deep at running back. You got 2 early second-round picks. You've got a third. You can move around a little bit if you want. So they can do so many things at 10. If Genty's there, the value you can't argue with. And again, I think they did so well in free agency and trading and adding so many veterans that I think you can make the case that pick is you can do that. You can go ahead and take that luxury pick. But man, I really do think that left tackle is the one place where they still need an upgrade and could do it there with a prospect that would make sense. But I don't know if Ryan Poles agrees.
Now, Luke, going back again to your history, your experience, your depth of knowledge covering the NFL draft and just scouting in general. When you talk about Will Campbell, he's a guy who I really do think he might slide in this draft, because as much as mainstream media wants to suggest that he's a left tackle, don't worry about the arm length. He's a left tackle, don't worry about the arm length. We've heard that time and time again in years past. Peter Skoronski, the most recent example, a Northwestern star offensive tackle, slides to the 11th pick, and now he's a guard in the NFL. Do you think that Will Campbell can actually play left tackle in the league with arms that measured in under 33 inches? First, I guess, what's your general scouting philosophy on arm length as it relates to offensive tackles? And then filter it down to Campbell, who obviously did great in the SEC, which is essentially the NFL's minor league.
Yeah.
And he showed maybe at times there were some concerns with length against some edge rushers in the SEC, but overall body of work, it wasn't a consistent issue that plagued him on film. Where do you stand on Campbell and arm length in general for offensive tackles?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of things, right? It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole pie. And I think for me, if you have shorter arms, you got to be better at other things, and you have to find a way to mitigate it. And I think for a guy like Campbell, who, again, if you look at the film and you see a guy who's consistently effective against the top talent in the country, he's played that position for a while. There were some technical, some moments where you're like, okay, the technique's not quite there either, but all the physical tools are there. You listen to him talk about his craft. He's clearly devoted to improving himself. This is a guy who also just turned 21 in January. Like, he played his entire career, 20 years and younger. So he's still got a lot of growing to do. He's a lot younger than a lot of the other prospects you'll find in this draft. And so for me, I'm not going to get hung up on an inch, a half an inch, whatever it is. If his arms are half an inch longer, that means all of a sudden now he's a better player. I don't buy that at all. We've had can you make some data that says on average, you have to be above this threshold to be an effective tackle. Yeah, but there's always outliers. And I think that's where the film has to tell the tale. And I think the concern for me with a guy like Campbell and I hate this immediate, oh, well, his arms are 32 instead of 33 or 33 instead of 34. So he'll be a guard. It's not Madden. This isn't like you just go into edit player and switch him to left guard and his rating maybe goes down one or stays the same. It's a completely different position. So if you're assuming that, I wouldn't take him as a left tackle at 10 or 5 or 11 or whatever it is, but I'll take him at guard at 15. That's stupid to me. You're projecting him to a position he does not play because his arms are a half an inch too short. And you would take him with the 15th pick, but you wouldn't take him with the 10th pick to play left tackle. That stuff doesn't connect for me. So to me, it's he either can play left tackle for you and he's worth a first round pick, top 15 pick, or he can't, and you need to have a conversation about somebody else. And so, Kelvin Banks, people have had the same conversation about him, where maybe he's not big enough, and maybe you need to slide him inside the guard, or maybe he could be better there and he was at left tackle. I mean, maybe, but he played left tackle. He played a lot of it at Texas. Again, a premier program against top competition. If you want to have that conversation, have it about Donovan Jackson at Ohio State, who played a bunch of guard at a high level and then kicked out to left tackle and played at a high level. You can have that conversation there, but it's just so much projection to assume that you can take a guy who played left tackle and because his arms are too short or because he's 6'3" instead of 6'4" or 6'5", that now you have to move him inside. I just don't buy that. The film needs to tell the tale there.
The where this really impacts the Bears, in my opinion, is you look at a GM and their track record and how they tend to attack the specific positions. And I think what we've learned about Ryan Poles over his few years at the helm in Chicago is that traits for him do matter along the offensive line. For example, Karan Amagaji last year, he drafted in the 3rd round out of Yale, which level of competition, in my opinion, is bigger concern for NFL draft prospects than, like you said, maybe a quarter of an inch of arm length. Why was Amagaji bumped up by Ryan Poles in his front office? Because the dude checked every single box from a traits standpoint, cut out of a lab to be a left tackle in the NFL. I think his arms are 35 inches. So he was a perfect case study for what Ryan Poles is looking at from an offensive tackle, what he's looking for from an offensive tackle position and what he's willing to ignore, like level of competition. Will Campbell's, the fact that he played in the SEC, has the high level of competition box checked, allow Poles to ignore the arm length? I mean, Poles passed on Peter Skoronski the year Skoronski came out. He let us all know with the breadcrumbs on that pick, a guy whose arms checked in under 33 inches didn't check the tackle box for the Bears. And at that time, they could have used an offensive tackle. So I do think Poles is going to be dissuaded a little bit by this offensive tackle class because of everything you just mentioned. I mean, you can go down the list of the top ranked offensive linemen in this draft, And it seems like every single one of them has a question mark, which is why, I mean, you know how it is, Luke, if there's a blue chip offensive tackle who checks every box, they don't get out of the top 5 picks. It's a no-brainer. There's a chance Will Campbell, if the Patriots don't take an offensive lineman at the 4th pick, there's no telling how far any of these guys will slide. The Jets, probably the next landing spot for an offensive lineman. Maybe the Saints, the Bears are obviously in that mix too. I could see a reality where we're sitting here at the 9th pick and no offensive tackles have been taken yet. I mean, I could really see that reality. Armand Membu, to me, has the best NFL outlook because of his athletic testing, but he's also not, cut in stone, perfect offensive tackle prospect. I mean, his arms measured what, like 3/8 of an inch longer than Will Campbell's. I think he's 33 or 33 and an eighth. Will Campbell's what, 32 and 5/8? I mean, that's like that.
That's what I mean, man. I think we're splitting hairs so much over that stuff. I know, like, for every, I don't disagree with you about Poles and his trend, but like for every, Will Campbell that might be able to stick at the next level, there's a LaRaven Clark who has 40 million inch arms, and it doesn't matter. Can you play football or not? So I think
now, Luke, you and I were both at the Senior Bowl when LaRaven Clark weighed in. That's when the weigh-ins used to be public, and we were able to go and actually
the worst thing ever, by the way.
The Underwear Olympics, right? The true Underwear Olympics. They call the scouting combine the Underwear Olympics. The weigh-ins were actually the Underwear Olympics. And the minute his arms checked in at like almost 36 inches or whatever it was, we looked at each other and we're like, no, he's going absolutely top 75. Like just because of one measurement. His film was average at best, and the guy got bumped up at least a round because of that. But here's the point. Like, there is precedent for how important that is. So to me, are you really going to have 2 or 3 offensive tackles with physical question marks, traits question marks, coming off the board in the first 12, 15 picks? That would be such an odd change of traditional scouting for all these general managers to take. I don't see it. And I think we're going to end up on draft day, and the Bears, who people are saying now, Armand Membu, Will Campbell will both be off the board before they pick. Ryan Poles could be looking at both of them on the board. I know it might be a hot take. It might sound crazy because, as you know, Luke, at this point in the mock draft and NFL draft calendar, narratives tend to get set in stone. Everybody has this top 10 projected, top 12 projected guys. Membu and Campbell are in that bundle. We see these crazy twists of fate all the time when the first round actually starts for real. And I think there's a lot of people underestimating how far these offensive tackles can slide because of the measurements. Now, if Ryan Poles is not sold on one of these offensive linemen and Ashton Jeanty actually does slide to number 10, do you think the Bears are truly, I know you touched on it briefly before, but do you think the Bears really right now, 1 year into Caleb Williams' career, year 1 of Ben Johnson as the head coach, they made these upgrades along the offensive line, but Joe Thuney's not on the right side of the age progression of his career. He's on the other half, right? Maybe 2, maybe 3 years left of high-level play. Do you think the Bears have put themselves in a position to say, okay, we are good enough right now with this roster to the point where we think we are right now a playoff team? And with Ashton Jeanty as the upgrade over DeAndre Swift, we can make that jump in the NFC North like the Eagles made when they added Saquon Barkley to their roster. Is it realistic to think that the Bears can actually pull out of the dealership with the sports car Ashton Jeanty? Do they have that in their budget? Or is this just fantasy football, wishful thinking, Sports Center mentality of fans imagining what it would be like to have Caleb Williams handing off to a 2,600-yard college running back? Are we really here with the Bears? I mean, I say this because as a tortured Bears fan for all these years, a team that has struggled to get it right in the first round, year after year, the hope that comes along with a first-round pick that tends to end in misery. What I like about what Ryan Poles has done is he's, I've heard this said a bunch of times on other podcasts. He's eating his vegetables, rebuilding this roster. He's going through the trenches. He's getting the offensive lineman. He's getting the defensive lineman. I mean, you really think he's going to pull the trigger if Jeanty is there? Do you really think that's a possibility?
I think, that's a interesting conversation because, and that's why, like you said, so many things, the narratives from us and all the media arms that are out, these days can kind of crystallize into a groupthink over these 3 or 4 months. And then we get to the actual draft and none of it matters because there are 32 individual front offices with hundreds and hundreds of different minds and different approaches and 32 different schemes and 32 different patterns of behavior, 32 different places in the pecking order, whether you're contending or rebuilding or somewhere in between. There's disagreement within those rooms about what direction should be and who people should take. So, would Ryan Poles do it? I don't know. What I will say is when I look at the board and when I look at the prospects that I value the most and the way that I would kind of break the tiers up in terms of the talent in this class, who are you going to take instead? If you have to stay at 10, who is the player that gets you so excited that he's worth taking over? And again, if there's any coach in the NFL that knows the value of a difference-making running back, it's the guy that had Jahmyr Gibbs for the last couple of years in Detroit, okay? And that trade, the Lions got raked for that trade when they moved up for Jahmyr Gibbs. Oh, in this economy, number 12 overall pick, you're trading up for a running back. Nobody who's watched Jahmyr Gibbs over the last 2 years has anything to say about that anymore. Okay, that he is one of the most electrifying, explosive running backs, and he has absolutely made a difference in that team's ability to go from being a laughingstock to a contender. He is a huge part of why they were so successful these last couple of seasons. And so I look at, again, number 3 overall player on my board, one of the most talented, one of the truly elite talents in this class, regardless of position. And then I look at every other place that they could conceivably use that pick, particularly if you're going to look at the defensive trenches, which I think would make the most sense for them. What is the difference between Mykel Williams at 10 and Nick Scourton at 39? Is there a decent enough gap between those guys and the depth in those classes to be able to be like, I have to spend this top 10 pick on an edge guy because it's a more valuable position, or an interior defensive lineman? You're going to take Kenneth Grant there when you could get Tyleik Williams in the top of the second round? Like, all of those things considered, yes, give me the special player. Give me the elite talent. Give me the guy who takes the pressure off my quarterback. Give me the do-it-all running back who can catch the ball out of the backfield, who can turn. I mean, my favorite thing about Ashton Jeanty is the contact balance, right? He got tackled by like 3 or 4 people multiple times and scored a 60-yard touchdown somehow. Like, and again, you can make the comment, obviously he's not going to be, Ryan Poles, you just said it about the offensive tackle position. Maybe level of competition doesn't matter to him. This is a guy that if you want to take pressure off your number 1 overall pick quarterback, give him a guy that if you can just hand the ball off to him every single time, there's a decent chance he could break it and pick up those chunk plays. And so you're telling me, does he make a big difference for Caleb Williams' development? Absolutely. Is he the best overall player on the board? I think absolutely. And when you look at the other positions they could address, where is the player and where is the position that makes you feel like, man, I've got to do this instead at 10 instead of taking Ashton Jeanty? I don't see anybody. I don't see anybody in any of those directions that makes them a better team, that makes Caleb Williams' life easier than Ashton Jeanty.
And it's interesting, Luke, and this kind of brings us to your mock draft that you recently posted on athlonsports.com. I recommend all Bears fans to make sure you check that out. You can get, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can get the link in the description of the video below. Luke, you put together a 4-round mock draft. We're just going to focus on the first round because, to me, everything you just said, I feel like came to fruition in your projection for the Bears in round 1. You have them doing something that I really think is not getting enough. There's not enough conversation about this possibility. The Bears in your mock draft trade up to the number 3 pick with the New York Giants. They deal both of their second rounders. They get some picks back. The minutia of the deal is irrelevant. At the end of the day, they make a power move to move up, and they land Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State, which we'll get into in a second. But I do think the psychology behind a move like that is exactly what you just outlined. Do you stay at the number 10 pick and take a guy who is essentially maybe the same value of someone you'll get at 39, barring an Ashton Jeanty freefall? Or do you say, screw it, we got this extra draft capital. We have built up a roster this offseason that we think can compete right now. And if we leave the first 2 rounds as is with 3 solid players, good players, starting quality players, or 1 elite player, what's better for the Chicago Bears right now? 2 years ago, yeah, you need to kind of get those 3 good players, start building out that roster. This year, dealing the 10, 39, and 41 to move up to number 3 to land Abdul Carter, that's a game-changing pick, a field-flipping pick. The NFC North could be turned upside down, adding Abdul Carter opposite Montez Sweat. So tell Bears fans a little bit about what your thinking was behind this type of strategy for the Bears and why you think it could be a realistic outcome on draft day.
Yeah, well, you touched on it a little bit in terms of why the team is kind of positioned to finally be able to make a move like that. And again, I love the second tier of this edge class. I think it's extremely deep, a lot of talented players, a lot of different types of guys, whatever scheme, whatever type of edge rusher you need. I mean, we could see if you count Jalen Walker as an edge out of Georgia, it depends on how you view him. But if he's an edge, I have 7 edge guys in that first round of that mock draft. I mean, that's a ridiculously deep class. And yet, I still think Abdul Carter is so much better than all the other ones. Like, I think he is that dude. I mean, he played with one arm in the college football playoff and was still the best player on the field every time he was out there. And so I think he is that dude, man. He is that guy. He is, again, number 2 overall player on my board and one of the 3 truly elite talents. And he does play a premium position. He does fill a position that I do think the Bears can upgrade. And he is that much better than every other player in this class at that position. And so when you look at a Bears team, like you said, you could get 3 solid players with those picks. But if you're willing to make that move and you get that one difference-making player, that elite player, would you rather have a solid defensive tackle and a solid defensive end who can get the job done? Or do you want Myles Garrett and TJ Watt and Trey Hendrickson, those guys that can take over the game, that when you need a 3rd and 9 sack to get off the field or to end a game, to win a playoff game, those are the guys that make it happen. And so if you have an opportunity, again, with that extra draft capital, you've got to also look at it the other way around. When I'm doing these trades, like they've got to make sense, or the fans will destroy you. Like they know better. The fans are really smart. They will say, hey, that doesn't make any sense. Why? It makes sense for the one team, but why would the other team do that? And so for me, I looked at it from the Giants' perspective, and Cam Ward goes number 1 in that mock. Travis Hunter goes number 2. So if I'm the Giants and I'm sitting there at 3, I'm saying, I like Abdul Carter a lot. He's worth this pick. Why would I trade out of here? Well, I've got Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. Like, why would I spend this number 3 overall pick? Again, if they're not into Shedeur Sanders, if Hunter's already off the board, and if they, again, think that they would like to stand pat with the 2 edge rushers they have instead of adding to the surplus, instead of filling one of the million needs that team has, they became a prime target for moving down, getting better value, getting more picks, because they have a ton of needs on both sides of the ball. And so when all those things kind of matched up, and also the fact that, people will look at it and be like, you can't trade up that high without giving up a first-round pick. If you're trading for a quarterback, yes. If you're trading for anybody else, it's cheaper. It just always has been. And so I think the Bears could get away. I think they got back like a late 3rd-round pick in the compensatory area in that deal, but they gave up 2 top 41 selections to go up 7 picks for a non-quarterback. Again, the trade chart said it was pretty even. I think sensibly it makes sense for both teams. And I do think that's the type of pick that the Bears could sell to the fans and say, hey, this is one of those picks that can put us over the top. He is that much better than the rest of the players at his position. He plays a premium position that's going to impact games this fall and beyond. And honestly, it was just a fun move. I'm glad it worked out because it's fun to present those different kinds of scenarios. It's not something I really have ever seen in a mock draft in this whole process. And I'm glad I was able to put it together because I think it's a lot of fun.
So it is fun. And it would be amazing if it turns into reality. But the odds that the Bears will be able to make a power move like that, like for any team being able to trade up that far in the draft, probably not the best odds that that'll happen. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Luke, before I let you go. If you had a wager your hard-earned Athlon Sports money on what the Bears are going to do in the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft, if you had your best guess, all mock drafts aside, everything that you've written for mock drafts in the past, I get it. I do a bunch of different mock drafts for Bears on SI. You got to change things up from time to time. You got to keep it fresh. But in your core, in your gut, your 2 decades worth or more of NFL draft studies and experience, what your best guess? Who's going to become a Chicago Bear on April 24th?
I think it's Ashton Jeanty if he's there. I think if he's not, honestly, I think they try to move back. A couple of weeks ago, I had a mock where he wasn't available, and I had them trading back with like Seattle, I think it was. They dropped back to 18, and they got a Marion Hampton. And it's funny. I think that's the one you and I texted about that, and I was like, hey, I've got him trading back. You know, here are the guys that are on the board. And I gave you like 5 or 6 names. Hampton wasn't one of them. And you literally just texted back Hampton with the eyeball emoji. And I hadn't really considered it until then. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, man, I kind of like that. So I went with that. Got him, I think, the 50th overall pick in the second round. So they were able to add another starting caliber player. So I think that they would love to move down because, again, I just don't see if Genty's off the board and you're not going to make a bold move to go up for one of the truly elite players in this draft who is worth trading up for. I don't see a lot of other players that are worth doing that. I think more teams are going to be trying to move down than to move up. I don't know if they'd find a partner. I don't know if they'd find a deal they love. I think in that situation, Will Campbell was on the board, so Seattle went up to get Will Campbell. But man, if they can't trade down and Genty's not there, I don't think that's a great scenario for them. But if Genty's on the board, man, it makes too much sense. He's worth that pick. He's one of the best players in the draft, and I think he does so much to help your quarterback out. And nothing matters if Caleb Williams doesn't hit, man. He's the captain of the ship. He is the whole thing. And so they've got to make sure he has what he needs. I think Ashton Jeanty would be a slam dunk pick. If he's there, I think he's the guy.
Well, I mean, Bears fans would love it. Ashton Jeanty definitely has a majority, I would say, of Bears fans in his corner supporting the narrative of him becoming the pick. And about Marion Hampton, I said a long time ago that the gap between him and Ashton Jeanty was not nearly as wide as many were led to believe early in the draft cycle. And now you're seeing a lot of mock drafts suggesting he's going to be a top half of the first round guy, which is, I think that's on point. And I'll tell you right now, Bears fans, I'm going to tell you right now, don't be surprised if Ashton Jeanty goes number 6 to the Raiders. Everything Luke was just talking about before with the offensive linemen and the edge rushers, everybody's kind of the same. There is a pretty big drop off from Omarion Hampton to the next running back on the board. Maybe a bigger drop-off than whoever the edge rusher or offensive lineman is that the Bears can get at number 10 to the next offensive lineman or edge rusher they can get in the second round. Don't be surprised if Omarion Hampton is the Jahmyr Gibbs of this draft, goes a lot higher in the first round than people might have projected, ends up with Ben Johnson, because the one thing about the Bears rushing attack that was a little bit different than the Lions, almost like working the opposite here. The Lions, before they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, had David Montgomery. They knew they had the banger between the tackles. They had signed him in free agency before that draft cycle. They knew they had their ground and pound guy. They needed the guy that could flip the field to complement him, and that's what Jahmyr Gibbs was. DeAndre Swift, for whatever you might think of DeAndre Swift, he's more of an explosive space playmaker. Get him out in space, let him make plays in the passing game, get him out wide in the running game. He is not going to be a dude that can get the short yardage or keep drives going, run after contact. He doesn't lean forward. Arm tackles bring him down all the time. They don't have that between the tackles guy. So if the Lions with Ben Johnson a couple of years ago took the Lightning to the Thunder, they might look to take the Thunder to the Lightning in this draft and get their David Montgomery. Because as big of a role as Jahmyr Gibbs has played in the Lions' success, there is no doubt that Ben Johnson would say that David Montgomery has been just as critically important. And he might say, where everybody's talking about Ashton Jeanty could be like the Jahmyr Gibbs offensive weapon, well, maybe Omarion Hampton can be their David Montgomery. And that's valuable.
Why didn't they just re-sign him? Why didn't they just re-sign him, Brian?
Man, that still breaks my heart. Luke, tell everybody where they can find all your work the next couple of weeks before draft kicks off and what you're going to be doing on draft weekend.
Oh, for sure, man. You can find it at athlonsports.com. Every Thursday morning for the last while, I've done a new 4-round mock draft. I try to do trades when I can, so it's a lot of fun. So I've got a couple more of those left. I'll have my final first-round mock draft the morning that the draft kicks off that Thursday. Like I said, go out and get the magazine, support that. Make sure we can keep making them because I love those magazines, and go pick one of those up. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Easterling. We got a ton of great stuff. Doug Farrar and I kind of teamed up to do some positional previews on Athlon Sports, so he's rolling those out with a little bit of my analysis from the scouting reports. his tape work that he's done and a lot of like the tweets and the clips that he's putting together on the top 5 players. We give you some sleepers, some small school guys. I'm putting together a pretty fun project where I've got 32 different experts from across the draft industry, a bunch of beat writers, all kinds of guys, and just kind of combining and teaming up to do a mock draft. So I got 32 different people working on that right now. We're rolling through it. We're about a third of the way through, so I can't wait to put that out there. That's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, man, just come on over again, athlonsports.com, and come over on Twitter and let's talk some football. It's going to be a fun ride the rest of the way.
And I'm going to promote your new podcast project too, Luke. Best podcast available. Make sure you BPAs. I mean, I'm getting it right? Best podcast.
Yeah, that's what it is, man. That's what it is. We're having a blast with that show, man.
You know, it's on YouTube. It's on all your podcast providers. Make sure you're following and listening to Luke and all his insights. You will become a smarter draft and overall football fan, even if Luke happens to be a Buccaneers guy. We'll let that slide. But Luke, always a pleasure having you, man. We're going to get you back here after the draft to give us your grades and your assessment of what the Bears did, and we'll compare. We'll look back at this episode and see how close you were with your projection for the Bears. If they end up trading up for Abdul Carter, man, you know you will have equity for as long as you want it in Bears Nation.
Yeah, I got to pull for that now, right? I got to want it to happen so I can just go back and say that I called it, right?
That's right, man. Hey, Luke, I appreciate you, man. Have a great draft weekend.
Hey, you too, Brian. Good to catch up, buddy.
I want to thank Luke Easterling for joining us today. And Bears fans, make sure, again, you are subscribed to the channel. You are subscribed on your favorite podcast provider. We're going to have Luke back after the draft to grade all of the Chicago Bears picks. We're going to see how close he came to actually getting his prediction right. It's an exciting time, Chicago Bears fans. A new Bear, a new first-round beacon of hope, a new draft class, an entirely new draft class is right around the corner, and we're going to have it all covered here on the Bears Talk podcast. So make sure you come back next time and bear down.
Thanks for listening to the Bears Talk Podcast with Bryan Perez, your ultimate source for all things Bears. Be sure to rate and review us and let us know what you think of the podcast.